Today, the world is changing in ways we could not imagine a few years ago. What may look like a small news headline, Russia deploys S-400 missiles in Venezuela, is, in truth, a sign of something much bigger. It is a symbol of how global power is shifting and how the old rules are beginning to fall apart. For many decades, the United States treated Latin America as its own backyard, a place it could control without question. But now, with Russian missiles placed only a few hundred miles from U.S. shores, that idea of control is breaking down. The S-400 missile system is not just another weapon, it is one of the most powerful air defense systems ever made. Its presence in Venezuela sends a clear message, a message of resistance, of sovereignty, and of a new world that refuses to live under the same old domination. This is not just about defense or military strength. It is about a nation saying to Washington, "You do not control this region anymore." To truly understand this moment, we must look beyond the missiles and see the economic story behind it. For years, Venezuela has suffered under harsh U.S. sanctions, restrictions that targeted its oil trade and finances, leaving its economy in ruins. But when a country is cornered, it looks for new ways to survive. Russia saw this and stepped in, not only to help, but to gain influence. What began as punishment from the U.S. has now turned into an opportunity for others to step in and build a new balance of power. This is how empires begin to weaken, not in one dramatic collapse, but through a series of small, powerful shifts that slowly move the world in a different direction. For many years, the United States placed its military bases and missile systems all around Russia, in Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states, and called it defense. But now, when Russia does the same in Latin America, the United States calls it provocation. This double standard shows the truth about global politics. The empire that once believed it could set all the rules is now being forced to play by them. The deployment of S-400 missiles in Venezuela has shaken Washington not only because of the technology, but because of what it represents. It is a symbol that the world is no longer afraid to stand up. The U.S. once had the luxury of distance. It could wage wars, create conflicts, and impose sanctions far away from its own soil. But with these Russian missiles so close, that comfort is gone. The U.S. now feels the same pressure that it once placed on others. The world is witnessing a rare moment of symmetry. Every move that Washington once made near Russia's borders is now being mirrored back toward it. The message is clear: the days of one-sided control are over. What's happening in Venezuela is not only a military matter, it's a political awakening. It is a sign that Latin America is no longer willing to be a passive observer in global power struggles. Countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua are reclaiming their space, showing that they can choose their own allies and make their own decisions. This is what truly worries Washington, not the missiles themselves, but the loss of obedience that once defined the region. The reaction from the United States to this event has been filled with fear and confusion. Meetings, press briefings, and urgent discussions in Washington all reveal one thing: deep insecurity. For an empire built on control, the idea that another power can challenge it in its own neighborhood is a nightmare. But this fear did not come out of nowhere. It is the result of decades of arrogance and neglect. Instead of treating Latin American countries as equals, the U.S. used them for economic and political gain. It offered punishment instead of partnership and used sanctions as a tool to force obedience. Now others are stepping into the space that arrogance left empty. Russia's move is smart. It costs little but has a huge impact. It gives Venezuela protection and gives Russia influence. It also sends a signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. can no longer control everything. For Washington, this is more than just a military challenge. It's a sign that its power is fading. The presence of Russian hardware on South American soil reflects a larger truth. When an empire stops listening and starts commanding, it eventually finds itself alone. What we are seeing today is not the start of a war, but the beginning of a new global order where power is shared instead of owned. The map of influence is being redrawn, and this time, the lines are not being drawn in Washington. Sanctions have long been one of America's favorite tools to punish other nations. They are meant to cause economic pain without firing a single bullet. Venezuela was one of the countries hit hardest by these measures. The goal was simple: crush its economy, block its oil trade, and force political change. But what happened was the exact opposite. Instead of collapsing, Venezuela found new allies. It turned to Russia, China, and Iran, countries that had also faced U.S. pressure and learned how to survive. Together, they began building new systems outside the U.S.-led order. Russia offered military and economic help. China provided investment and trade alternatives. Iran shared technology and energy support. These partnerships were not built out of ideology, but out of necessity. They showed that when one door closes, others can open. The deployment of S-400 missiles in Venezuela is the clearest sign of this new alliance. It shows that punishment does not always create submission. Sometimes it creates unity. The sanctions that were meant to isolate Venezuela have instead connected it more deeply with other powers. The empire's tool has become its own trap. Every sanction, every threat, every punishment has driven nations closer together in defiance. This is the boomerang effect of empire. What it sends out eventually comes back. There is also a powerful irony at work. For decades, the United States called itself the defender of free markets and open trade, but now it uses economic pressure as its main weapon. Sanctions, trade bans, and restrictions have become its tools of control. Yet, each time they are used, they weaken America's influence a little more. Countries are learning to survive without using the US dollar. They are trading in local currencies, creating new banking systems, and forming new financial alliances. A few years ago, being sanctioned meant being isolated. Today it means joining a growing network of nations that no longer depend on the Western system. Russia, Iran, China, and Venezuela are among the leading examples of this new reality. They are learning to build a parallel world economy. The more Washington tries to control others, the more it loses control itself. The S-400 missiles standing in Venezuela are not only about defense, they are a symbol of this economic independence, a declaration that the old world order is falling apart. The idea that the US dollar and US approval are necessary for survival is no longer true. The world is changing, and with it the balance of power. What was once a punishment has now become a badge of resistance. The age of fear is being replaced by the age of freedom. Across the global south, a quiet revolution is unfolding. Countries that were once silent are now speaking together. They are creating new trade routes, new alliances, and new ways of working without the old centers of power. In Africa, governments are signing deals that bypass the dollar. In Asia, the BRICS alliance is growing stronger, building banks and payment systems of its own. In the Middle East, oil is being sold in currencies other than the dollar, and in Latin America, the presence of Russian defense systems sends a message. The world no longer belongs to one empire. The nations once called developing are no longer waiting for permission to act. They are writing their own rules. This movement is not just about anger toward the West, it's about independence. For decades, Washington claimed to support democracy and free choice, yet it punished those who chose differently. Now those same countries are saying, enough. They are building a system based not on obedience, but on equality. The S-400 deployment is one symbol of this wider change. It represents not war but willpower, the will to exist without being told how to. The power once held by one nation is now being divided among many. And this time the change is not being made through bombs or revolutions, but through quiet cooperation. The truth that many in Washington refuse to face is that military power alone no longer guarantees control. Real power now lies in economics, in trade, energy, and information. By placing the S-400 in Venezuela, Russia has done more than secure an ally. It has helped reshape the idea of global security itself. Today, true security means being able to protect your economy and your independence from external domination. For Venezuela, this partnership is not just about missiles, but about the ability to survive. It means having the space to trade, to make decisions, and to grow without fear of economic destruction. The S-400 has become more than a defense weapon. It is a symbol of protection against control. It protects not just airspace, but sovereignty. Around the world, similar changes are happening. Nations that once relied on Western powers are now finding strength in cooperation with others. The battlefield is no longer just land and sky, it is the global economy. And in that new battlefield, many countries are learning to fight back, not with weapons but with independence. The message behind these silent missiles is loud and clear. The time when one country could control all others has ended. History has shown again and again that no empire lasts forever. Every great power from Rome to Britain believed it could rule the world forever, but power that is not shared always collapses under its own weight. The United States is now facing that same moment. For years it acted as if its dominance would never end, controlling markets, influencing governments, and using sanctions to shape the world. But the deployment of Russian S-400 missiles in Venezuela is proof that this era is ending. It is not just a political or military event, it is a sign of a larger truth. The age of U.S. monopoly is fading. The more Washington tries to hold on to control, the faster it slips away. The same tools it used to dominate others are now being turned against it. The world has learned its methods and is using them in return. This is how empires fall, not with a sudden crash, but with a slow realization that their power is no longer absolute. The S-400 missiles in Venezuela stand as silent witnesses to this change. They are not just weapons, they are mirrors reflecting the decline of an old order and the birth of a new one. The world is no longer asking for permission. It is moving forward on its own path, and that, more than anything else, is what truly frightens the empire that once thought it could never be challenged. Thank you.